for Rian Hughes' art book, Device Art Commercial. In other places I've actually seen it as File Under Art Commercial, so I don't know what that's about, but anyway, all over the book it just says Device Art Commercial. And this book was published by a German publishing house in 2002, and it's a really weird, really fantastic little art book. As you can see, even from the format, the size of this book, it's a hardcover, and it's about the size of like a first edition hardback novel, so much smaller than art books usually are, but it's also about 300 pages, which means it's also a lot thicker than most art books are, which is really great. Now, I'm very much predisposed to liking this book because I think Rian Hughes is just one of the best illustrator graphic designers around. I just love his work so much, so this book was a real treasure for me. And like with most artist monographs, whether you like this book or not is really just going to basically boil down to if you like his art style, which is that very sort of lifestyle, sort of vector illustration style. So if you're not a fan of this sort of art style, then I can't really sell you on this book. But if you are, like I am, and you really dig this sort of thing, then I think this is a really fantastic book. There are a couple of problems with it which really need to be addressed, and that problem really is the one and only problem, and that is the size of some of the images that are printed. I mean, first of all, you saw in this introduction, the font size on this must be like 0.6 or less. I'm not one of those people who goes onto Amazon to give books, a 1 or 2 star review because the text was too small and I needed a magnifying glass and all that sort of thing. I guess that actually is kind of a legitimate criticism, but I've never had that problem. My eyes are fine. But man, reading that introduction gave me such a headache. It was so tiny, and there's so much space up the top and around, and that small font continues everywhere throughout the book. I know it's kind of meant to be, let's look at it again. It's meant to sort of have a kind of, oh, by the way, the foreword is written by Grant Morrison, and it's so ridiculous but so fantastic at the same time. But see all this space, I mean, I know that it's trying to have a certain layout and aesthetic, but really, this book is a book on commercial design, so if you can't marry form and function, then it's kind of ironic that would be so bad. But I don't want to talk too much trash about it because, like I said, I just adore Rian Hughes' work. But see, this is probably one of the only art books where thumbnail images are almost literally thumbnail in size. It is so ridiculous, some of these, and as we go through later you'll see you just can't make out any detail. And this sort of size book, like I said, is very small for an art book, but for Rian Hughes' style, because it is that very simplistic sort of vector style, you don't need a giant, you wouldn't need something like this in A4 size. Getting the images around this size, even something like this is absolutely fine. It makes the book so much easier to hold and look through, and I think it is actually a really appropriate, something like this looks great. You don't need that any bigger, it's fine. But then, see, then down here, you just can't make out anything, and sometimes it gets even worse, and that's really the only gripe I have with this book, and it is a pretty major one. The book really does feel like this is less of a showcase of his work, and almost like this is like a folder in his filing cabinet where he's just put everything, which is kind of an exciting approach. It really feels like you're getting a kitchen sink collection, a comprehensive collection of his work. But see, great if we had more images like this. But then, see, look how tiny that's literally smaller than a thumbnail, and then there's all this blank space. It's sort of like, it is a bit ridiculous, but like I said, it really does have this sort of comprehensive feel, which is so fantastic, because most artists' monographs really feel like or indeed art books in general, really feel like they're just being a best of. I really liked getting the sensation that this was almost like a complete collection of everything he's done. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, but it was great just to have a book that had so much stuff included. But then at the same time, it kind of defeats the point a little bit when it's too small to even really be able to look at it. Like these pages, this is fantastic. See, you don't need the stuff bigger than this. It's taking up the entire page. There's no blank space, and it's, very much appropriately sized for this style of artwork. But then there are just between maybe 10 and 20 pages where the art is just, it's just so small, and there's a lot of wasted space that it's really bamboozling to think that anyone would even think it's worth printing the art at that size. But I'm not too interested in belaboring that point, because overall I think this is a fantastic book. I'm so glad I got it. I'm so glad that I think this is a great testament to Rian Hughes' work. I'm not as big a fan of his typography and graphic design, and if you don't know who Rian Hughes is, you'll see as we go through this. There's tons of illustration, which is what I like most of his work, but then you'll also see a lot of typography and just sort of general graphic design things, which I'm not as big a fan of, but they're still fine. I think he's enormously talented when he's not trying to be too arty or trendy with what he does. I think he's just one of the best sort of cartoon, mid-century modern inspired, lifestyle, whatever vector, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's so great, and it's just a style that I really love, and I think he's so great at it. So if you do like his stuff and you think you can sort of overcome the issue of having a lot of stuff too small, it's just trying to cram so much onto one page and you just can't make out really any detail. It's kind of weird. But if you can get over that, if you can, be happy with what is here, which to a degree I can sort of just ignore that stuff and just enjoy the stuff that is sort of printed more appropriately, which I definitely can to a large degree, then I definitely recommend this book if you like what you're seeing, if you like his style, if you like this sort of artwork in general. It's just really, really fantastic stuff. What would have been cool is if the book had focused doing more sort of full and half page reproductions of the art, and then released a second volume or even a third and a fourth, now that this book was published in, like I said, 2002, which I guess Rian Hughes has been working for maybe 20 years by then, and now it's been another 15 years beyond that, and he still is working today and has done tons of work since this, and it would be great to see that as well, because he is such a prolific illustrator and designer. So you can see a lot of his logo work, some of the stuff he's done for DC Comics. And this book also comes with a CD in the back. I've already taken that out because getting it out of its case was almost impossible. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. Even this is really well designed. I'm not sure if you can see, but it's one of those old mini discs, if anyone remembers those, but printed on like a full-size CD format, and so it's clear on the outside. It looks really great. And what's on here, except for fingerprints, is it's crap. Really, there are like 10 downloadable fonts, some really not very good wallpaper backgrounds, and then a couple of like 15-second flash animations for some very poorly aged advertising that Rian Hughes worked on. There's nothing on there that's going to be like the tipping point that's going to influence you to get this book. The book really is the major. That was just sort of like, I guess, like an added novelty. Rian Hughes has done a lot of other books, and he's done about 3 books on like typography and lettering. He's also done some books that aren't on his work about sort of lifestyle illustration of the 50s and 60s. He's done bunches of comic books and some other books that I'm not sure really how to describe. They are sort of design books. He's also done I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called Soho Dives and Soho Divas, something like that. It's like a whole book similar to this in sort of size and thickness that is sort of all just about like his pin-up art, I guess you'd say. But this one is definitely my favorite of all his books. So yeah, except that issue of having some things reproduced far, far too small. Overall, I think this is a really fantastic book by one of my favorites.